Hello, everybody, and welcome into Gamecock Central. Kendall Smith and Wes Mitchell coming at you here with another edition of the Recruiting Rundown. Again, so much happening in the world of recruiting for South Carolina. But Wes, let's kick it off with a little check-in. How you doing today?
I am good. We are coming to the end of what you would call this portal window, Kendall, and South Carolina, it appears, for the most part, has their class locked in. Got some more good news last night, and so we're good. I think the Gamecock Central readers and viewers are good as well.
Yeah, that good news. Let's talk about it. Let's kick off the show on Brandon Cisse, a defensive back who just committed to the University of South Carolina out of the transfer portal. He's joining the Gamecocks from NC State, but he has South Carolina ties. He is from Sumter. So, Wes, how did this commitment come to be for South Carolina?
Yeah, Lakewood High School product initially, and this one ended up being a little bit of a battle, Kendall. You know, we thought when he entered the portal that South Carolina was going to be very much in this one, probably even the favorite. But once he hit the portal, you can see what type of player he is, judging by the level of interest he received. Obviously, South Carolina was involved, but Ole Miss, who we know is very active in the portal, they were heavily involved. Lane Kiffin was even, tweeting, kind of being his normal troll self about how he was in Sumter, South Carolina. You also had Georgia try to get involved, Florida try to get involved. So this ended up being a pretty heavy SEC battle with South Carolina hosting him on a visit and Ole Miss hosting him on a visit pretty quickly after he entered the portal. It ended up coming down to those two, South Carolina and Ole Miss, a little bit of a back and forth there in the end. I do think ultimately that this was a situation where he did grow up kind of coveting an offer from South Carolina, did not have an offer out of high school, and now this was an opportunity for him to go play at what I believe was kind of his dream school. I look forward to maybe hearing from Brandon himself about his commitment here soon, but kind of grew up watching the Nicky Memori types here at South Carolina as well, and I think maybe there's some crossover there in terms of them training growing up, and so this really is a true homecoming for him, and I think a dream scenario for him to get to come back and play for his home state school.
Yeah, big commitment for South Carolina. We always talk about the way that South Carolina is able to recruit these in-state guys, not just at the high school level, but we've seen it several times now with the transfer portal, getting guys who are from the state of South Carolina, went to high school in South Carolina to come back and play for South Carolina. And obviously a huge commitment for the Gamecocks in the sense that it's a guy from a Power 5 school, NC State, not too far away. You beat out Ole Miss for this one, and that's obviously a huge win as well when you're able to win those recruiting battles against fellow SEC schools. But it's not just Brandon who committed to South Carolina. Devonte Miles as well, a defensive lineman from Bowling Green, joins the Gamecocks from the transfer portal. We talked so much, Wes, when we were leading into this portal period about South Carolina really filling some gaps on the defense. This is something that they focused on here. This is obviously a massive commitment as well for South Carolina. So once again, how did this commitment happen for the Gamecocks?
Yeah, so Miles committed over the weekend, and this was one going into this past weekend. We had started to anticipate that he was going to be a part of the class. Took a visit to South Carolina sort of late last week, and this was also an SEC battle as well. Had SEC schools heavily involved. In this case, it was Mississippi State. He took a visit there. Then he took the visit to South Carolina, and then he was actually scheduled to take a visit to Georgia after the South Carolina visit. But really saw all he needed to see, all he wanted to see, and South Carolina did a great job of getting him to go ahead and shut down his recruitment before he left campus and sort of lock in with the Gamecocks. Like you said, interior defensive line, huge priority for them. They were able to kind of kick off this class with Gabe Brownlow-Dindy early on, the commitment from Texas A&M. Then they sort of cap it off with the Bowling Green product, who, I think when you watch his film, Kendall, you can see what South Carolina saw in him. This is a kid who is light on his feet for his size. He can move a little bit raw, I think, still as a player. That the key thing for him, I think, is going to be getting in that strength and conditioning program with the coaches here at South Carolina, adding some weight. He's listed at about 6'5", 280 to play in the SEC on the interior defensive line. You're going to want to add a little bit of weight there, but you can see sort of the upside here, the potential here, if you will. And I think a guy where Travian Robertson just saw some natural traits, some natural athleticism, and is saying, I can develop him into being an SEC defensive lineman. We know these guys are hard to find. We know how heavily coveted interior defensive linemen are in the portal. So South Carolina getting a little bit creative with this one. But, I think continuing to add depth there was a huge priority for them in this portal window. And to kind of add both of these newest commitments together, Kendall, I think it really, you go to the defensive backfield as well as Cisse. I saw people ask, like, why did they even need another defensive back? Well, what this does, this brings in someone, like you said, has played at the Power 5 level, who has already proven himself and comes in, I think, can start at South Carolina in the case of Cisse, was a number 9 cornerback in the transfer portal. And most importantly, he can play that kind of nickelback role or more of a true cornerback role. So he has that position versatility where you're building competitive depth and may the best man win. In the case of Devonte Miles, with his size, he's coming in as an interior defensive lineman, but actually could play a little bit outside as kind of a bigger defensive end type as well. So you do have two guys that do have some of that position versatility here.
Yeah, and asking the question of, well, do you really need XYZ position added on through the portal? If you're South Carolina, you only want to continue to build that depth. And I've probably said it 5 times in the last week, but it's really what separates the good teams from the great teams, not only in the SEC, but across the college football landscape. You look at these teams that are at the top of the ranks, and they have a ton of guys at various different positions, and they've got to compete and battle for the opportunity to play. And that's something that Shane Beamer always talks about, is just competing within the program, and may the best man win in that regard. But Wes, it has been a very busy time with this transfer portal. So the next question is, what's next for South Carolina? Is this it for the Gamecocks? Should people be expecting more?
Yeah, and Kendall, I will always leave the caveat there that sometimes things are just happening behind the scenes, and as much as we try to track it, so sometimes there are surprises. South Carolina tacked on Davis Bevel as a walk-on transfer. I remember about this time last year, it feels like it was kind of a late, out of nowhere surprise addition to South Carolina's class. So give me that caveat. Don't come back posting if there is a surprise. Well, Wes said there's going to be no surprises. However, it does sort of feel like Carolina is done in terms of transfer additions for this window. There's nobody else as of this exact moment that we're kind of tracking or keeping an eye on as a possibility. It really felt like Cisse was the last remaining target. They, of course, locked him up on Monday night. He is already signed as well. Most of the other, if not all the other transfer portal guys are on campus starting classes. So Cisse will be on campus as well soon. And really, you're kind of running out of time to even add anyone else, because that add drop date is next week at the beginning of the week for South Carolina's actual semester. So what you would kind of look at it like from this point forward, Kendall, this is the way the staff will probably look at it too. They've got spring practice coming up. At the end of spring practice, you're going to have an even better idea. Are there any remaining needs for South Carolina? Maybe a guy steps up, and maybe there's an area you said that was a need. Now it's not. But you do still have that 10-day window that is the spring transfer portal window, where I could see South Carolina potentially adding another interior defensive lineman, potentially adding another edge guy. And I do think they're going to take another look at that wide receiver position as well. But for the most part, they are, I believe, going to lean on some of these young guys at wide receiver. A bunch of them are going to go through spring practice. So they're going to have an opportunity to evaluate all of them, see if they're ready to make an impact, and see where they are in their progression. So that's a position where you could see them go heavy at receiver to add a guy after the spring, or you could see them, based on what they saw in the spring, say, no, we're good. We like what we have here already.
All right. Well, it will stay busy for South Carolina. That is for sure. A successful transfer portal window. Would you say so? Yeah.
I think, especially tack on Cisse at the end, add Devonte Miles. There were a couple of other defensive linemen they were heavily involved in. They would have liked to have added one of those guys. That's probably the biggest miss, you would say. But for the most part, you're not going to hit on everybody in a class. And I think adding Rasul Faison at running back, who we've already talked about, that's a great get, I think, for South Carolina. adding a bunch of depth across the board, offensive line depth. And when I say depth, these are guys that are going to compete for starting jobs, but you're just raising the level of competition at all those spots. Adding a couple of linebackers who have SEC experience, I think is big. So all in all, they really did a good job of going out, filling needs without just kind of what you would call overspending and just saying, hey, we're just going to overpay guys to almost force them to feeling like they have to come to South Carolina. It was more, let's stay within a certain budget in terms of your NIL resources and recruit guys that fit the program, which is something we've always heard Shane Beamer talk about.
The recruiting train continues to roll on. This transfer portal window coming to an end, but obviously high school recruiting continues. And then we will talk more about transfers as that spring window opens up. Wes, fantastic work as always to you and the entire GC crew. We appreciate it. And we appreciate all of your insight here on the recruiting rundown. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Again, for Wes Mitchell, I'm Kendall Smith. This has been the recruiting rundown here on Gamecock Central. Head to GamecockCentral.com and follow us on social media at Gamecock Central for more. We'll see you later.